All right, dear ones, let's sit. I'm gonna uh, I want to talk a little bit about using our practice in a very intentional healing way. Uh, when I am uh, when I'm struggling some with mood, I actually call upon some of the mind states, which are really very physical, that tend to feel very healing. And I I don't teach this generally because I first learned to arouse these states on retreats, and and so I'm not sure that the a person who hasn't experienced them before can arouse them without, like what seems to happen with retreats is that uh, we go deep, but it's almost as if we've created a pathway to certain mind states that after the retreat, even though we might not be able to just directly always get there, they are somewhat accessible to us. And when we go back on retreat, we'll find that we're often able to fairly quickly get re-arouse those mind states. So, but I know they are natural states, uh, and so I'm just going to try to point to them, which is as we're meditating. That in itself is somewhat difficult because they aren't ordinary states that we can talk about. So we'll see. I'll just try to hypnotize you into feeling good. Basically, is what I'm going to try to do here. Okay. But if you have any discomfort with that, just ignore me. You can always mute me. I think you can mute me. Well, you can mute your speakers. All right. Sorry. Let's start sitting. So settling back first into comfortable meditation posture, so that your body can be relaxed. And in this orientation of practice, we really want to have a sense of comfort, ease. So as you exhale, just having a sense of releasing all tension, stress, everything dissolving, melting out of the body. And we have a sense too of tremendous openness, sense of letting go of any inner conflict, any fear, really arousing what could be called the feeling of love. It's not a personal love, but more like a profound safety in which we can abandon any defenses. In fact, a sense of boundaries dissolves. With this, there might be a smile, discovering the inner joy the inner joy that comes with stillness and peace. We might feel uplifted, bright, light. We might feel a kind of radiant energy that can come as a wave or as even kind of bolts of enlivening energy passing through the body. You might feel as if you're being held or carried by this bright energy, radiating through the body, uplifting. And even with this flowing energy, there's a sense of something profoundly still within. The stillness behind the movement of breath. The still point surrounded by the energy of life, the bright joy of being alive. Just keep coming back to a sense of openness, of surrender. It's very simple. All right. Thank you. So, as I said, kind of challenging to try to kind of get across that practice. Um, really trying to arouse these two qualities, uh, piti and sukha, translated as rapture and joy. And they're very much kind of felt in the body. And they're the beginnings of the jhana states. But they're accessible in ordinary states too. It's kind of a matter of finding your way into them, and I wish I could be more skilled at sort of guiding you there, if indeed it's possible to guide you. I know my own first experiences with them was kind of random, just came out of the blue, out of intensive practice. So I don't know, how much guidance works. Anyway, that aside, I just wanted to mention someone was sent a chat about Venmo, and I don't know who thought that an app in which you got to see everybody you know, all your contacts, like financial transactions, who thought that was a good idea. It's very of a different generation than I am part of. I try to obscure those transactions rather than publicize them. But it is a very convenient app. So if you don't want it to be seen, I think there's a private function on there. If you send something to me, yeah. So this morning, gotten to the part of One Breath at a Time. Well, I should say, for those who may be joining us new, that we've been going through my book, One Breath at a Time, a little by little. We could start putting money on which will end first, the book or the pandemic. At the pace we're going, it looks like it could be very close between the two. We shall see. We're still in step 3, and we're on the section in step 3 called "Don't Know." It's a fairly short section. It's page 66. It starts, and but I think a really valuable concept. I'll read the opening. Some people may feel I'm trying too hard to describe God. All of my ideas may just be attempts to find words to explain what is ultimately unexplainable. As the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching say, the way that can be spoken is not the true way. And so this section does come after the parts of the book where I'm trying to give some kind of a Buddhist idea of what a higher power might be. And for me, that was a helpful exercise, to explore that and try to really make some kind of coherent correlation between Buddhism and the 12 steps, Buddhism in step 3 particularly. The idea of turning your will and your life over to some power, and the language of the steps is so distinctly Christian that I really felt like I wanted to be able to ground it in something distinctly Buddhist. But as I describe later in this little section, I was teaching with a friend in Colorado, and it was actually the year before this book was published. It was as I was kind of writing this book, uh, and we taught a day long together in Denver, and I gave this kind of talk on, Dharma God, and at the end of which he kind of stepped in and said, and maybe we should just think of God as a mystery, uh, and that that felt a little deflating for me at the time. I thought I'd given a good talk. It was like, oh, thanks. But I think a couple things about that. One is that I'm pretty sure, like, he was speaking also for people for whom all of this, like, intellectual sort of explanation wasn't really helpful. And I think that's a really important point. We each have our own way of approaching this process, which is what, of course, the line at the end of the step, as we understood him, is meant to point to, that we can each have our own approach to this. And I do have perhaps a tendency to want to kind of define, this is Buddhist God, and somehow, uh, inscribe that. and and ultimately, yeah, I don't think that's helpful to try to. That's again the point of the open part of the step, as we understood him, that nobody is supposed to define God for us. So I think it's a really helpful piece when if we're tying ourselves in knots around these ideas, and it's becoming this sort of mental battle, to realize, like, I really don't know. But the idea of don't know goes well beyond just the idea of higher power, don't know about higher power. So I'll read a little bit more from later in this section. The Zen Buddhist teacher from Korea, this is San Sunim, or Sung San. I'll put his name in the chat because he's no longer with us. This is his formal name, but he's better known as San Sunim. He founded the Providence Zen Center, and then many other Zen centers, Cambridge Zen Center. There's a great story about how he came to the United States as a monk, but he had no real support here, and he was working in a laundromat in Providence, Rhode Island. And these students, presumably from Brown, would come in to do their laundry, and little by little they started to realize that this guy had something going on, and then finally they started to ask him to teach, and that's how he became. He just said, "Okay, now I'll teach." But he was already a very, profoundly realized being. Anyway, San Sunim teaches don't know. In this practice, we recognize that we really don't have answers to many of life's basic questions. What happens after death? Don't know. How exactly does karma work? Don't know. Is there a God who created everything? Don't know. What's going to happen next? Don't know. Life is full of surprises. Much of our time is spent trying to control what happens and to understand how things work. When we practice don't know, instead of thinking or hoping that we have the answers, we stay alert to each unfolding moment as a unique experience. In this way, we bring a freshness to each moment. Beginner's mind, Zen Master Suzuki Roshi called it, which helps us to stay awake to the magic of life. So Sansanim, he had this very simple meditation practice. Some of you may have heard me teach it. Um, oh, you're right. Sorry, sorry, distracting. The Sansanim, I put it in privately to someone who had written me something. This one that it defaults to whoever you last spoke to. Sorry. Start again. I'm really going to stay so on track here. Nothing's going to distract me. Sung San. So if you're looking for his books, he has a book called Dropping Ashes on the Buddha. It's like 40 years old. And his better name, I don't know why he has these different names, but he's better known as Sung Sansanim. Okay. He has his practice. and I sat with him a little bit a long time ago. A very simple practice. He says, on the in-breath, say to yourself, clear mind, clear mind. And on the out-breath, say, don't know. And that was how his voice was. Don't know. You don't have to say it like that to yourself. You're saying this silently anyway. But it's a really sweet little practice, you know. It's just a mantra, basically. Clear mind, clear mind. Don't know. So the specific idea of this as a guiding idea in life is to keep you really alert to what's happening. You know? And it really, it's reminding us how much we take for granted and how much we assume we know. And when we're going through life, like, day by day in our routines, and right now, many of us are just like in this very limited routine, right? You sort of think you know what's going to happen next. And it's why when something violent or very serious, maybe very good, happens, there can be this kind of feeling of almost snapping out of a dream. That oh wait, what? Things aren't the way I thought they were. It's the kind of a cliche of people getting a terminal diagnosis, and then all of a sudden they appreciate every little thing, right? Every little moment of their lives, every interaction with the person, every smell, every taste. And it's because in that moment they realize that they don't know, that everything is the immediacy of everything, that the fact that everything is in this state of constant change. So don't know is actually pointing to impermanence. That's kind of the underlying principle of don't know mind, that everything is changing even though it doesn't look like it's changing. One of the principles of change, and this is more, I don't know if we'd call it scientific, but I've read about it in more of a scientific context, is that our minds tend to think of change as gradual, but that really what happens with lots of kind of change in the natural world as well as in human world, which I suppose is natural as well, but that things go along and they seem to not, they seem to be gradually changing, but what happens is that they kind of build up to a breaking point. And then there's, and earthquakes are a great example of that, right? They're just, the, these plates are, they're grinding, you're grinding, they're just, and oh yeah, I mean, they're just grinding together, little stuff is happening. And then there's that break, and it seems sudden, and it is sudden in the sense that there's a sudden change, but it was happening all along. It was building to that all along. So we see this all the time. Of course, we see it in the racial justice movement right now. It's a perfect example of it, right? And what just happened with gay rights yesterday, that people think, oh well, there's this gradual change in. I mean, I think of the moment when gay marriage was made legal. It's like, well, things, it's very slow, these gradual changes. And then all of a sudden it was like this profound flip. And it's not just that the Supreme Court did something, it's that they were reflecting something bigger in the culture. I don't mean to, uh, always be bringing in these sort of social, political issues, though they seem so, they seem like perfect examples of spiritual principles to me. That's one of the main reasons I bring them up, not so much to talk about them specifically, but so recovery, much the same, right? I was talking about this on Friday too, about change, and that when we get sober, it can seem like a sudden thing, but there's a build up to it. So don't know, again, helps us to stay on track, to kind of keep balanced. So maybe there's an aspect of don't know that also that's about the middle path, that we say you're getting into you're in a certain mind state, and you feel like, wow, I'm just in this mind state, like I don't know how to get out of it. But because again, it seems permanent, it feels solid, but you don't know if you're going to get a phone call in 5 minutes. It's going to completely change your mind state, right? At these circumstances, there's that feeling of looking for a job, and you're like, it's just going on and on week after week, and it just seems pointless sending out all these applications. Then suddenly you get a job, and it seems like, wait, where did that come from? And I mean, it's obvious where it came from, but we start to think, I'm never going to get a job. That knowing, or the opposite, like, this is great, I've got it all now, I've got the perfect life, uh, I've got the great relationship, the great job, and I live and everything is perfect now, and something happens, right? Yeah. I don't want to keep giving examples because there's too many, but yeah, I guess in daily life, what I find most helpful about this is to not believe that what's happening right now is going to uh, keep happening. It's just not. It 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 and that's the good news and the bad news, right? So that's kind of the essence of impermanence, you know. Um, but I think coming back to this idea of step 3 and higher power and how we hold this, in those moments of uh, confusion, moments when uh, we feel like we've lost our connection to our higher power, when we feel like we've lost our connection to our program or to our spirituality, to just remember that that's okay, that you don't have to have an answer, that you don't have to have it nailed down. You sort of, people can get into a place like, oh, I've got the higher power thing figured out now. Okay, good. Now I can move on to other problems or other issues. And then, as I say, like, things change, and something might change internally, something might change externally. I know for me, I describe uh, in a couple places in my writing about, a particular retreat, a self-retreat I was on in the summer of 1992, where kind of my concepts of God that I had been kind of using in my sobriety kind of dissolved in that kind of emptiness of really deep stillness and meditation. And there was, uh, at first, I I felt like, oh, no, I need to find another way of characterizing, another way of naming God or characterizing God. Like the word God doesn't feel right now. So I need to find something else. And so there was that kind of need to know, right? Uh, and 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 I didn't. I did. I made something up, but it wasn't really satisfactory, and it didn't really carry me very far. At the same time, because I had come to that through a spiritual experience in itself, it wasn't that I had come to it through an intellectual, sort of, oh, God doesn't make sense, like logic thing, or sort of atheistic analysis. But I came to it because of the openness and sort of, yeah, dissolving of uh, of the sort of solidity of that idea. Um, I didn't really then need so much uh, language or concepts because that was kind of when you're in that space, um, that's not important. And in fact, that's a very profound space because it's a realization of the emptiness of those concepts. So with that kind of insight, at least for me at that time, uh, it didn't sort of threaten my spirituality. It just meant that I wasn't going to sort of have the same uh, concrete concepts. Um, so there's been a couple of things that people have written while I was talking, so I want to look at them, and at the same time, I'll just open it up and say that I'd be happy to hear any reflections or thoughts from anyone. Oh, well, anyway, someone is just writing about Venmo and about being public with it. I'm not concerned about someone seeing that. I'm not bothered by it. I just think it's a silly, a silly idea for social media. So please don't worry about that. Yeah. All right.
Hi, Kevin. It's Angela.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. This has been really, really helpful. I'm like connecting it also to like not only about, you know, my concept of a higher power, or, you know, what the truth is, like just that I've been kind of getting more into, you know, especially in the last few months. But like during the meditation, I had this moment of which doesn't happen very often, but I had this moment of like just kind of sadness for the way that I criticize myself so much. Especially in my meditation, you know, I was just like, yeah, really being hard on myself about so many things. And I just was continuing to like try and just let it go. And so, and my sponsor often, I think, helps me to see this, because I'm so hard on myself, just the like, that I don't know, you know, I don't know what, like if I think, and I also, that line about much of our time is spent trying to control what happens and to understand how things work.
Yeah.
Yeah. um so just that I don't know how things work. I don't know what is supposed to happen or what wasn't supposed to happen, or, you know, what I should have, shouldn't have done. And so it just is like something so helpful for me to continue to think about and process and try to like turn to, especially in those moments. So yeah, thank you. And like forgiveness came to my mind again. That came up in Friday, um, which, you know, just in everything that's happening, but then also I guess maybe like in thinking about myself as well, and like forgiving myself, and just being able to, like, how forgiveness, I guess, plays into these things, which isn't really what you were talking about today, but it just was something that had come up and kind of connects. So that's all.
Thank you. Yeah, I have the feeling that a lot of people are relating to what you said. I do, and I do think forgiveness is tied into this. That, uh, but I'm not sure how. But I sort of feel it too as you're saying that. I, um, and yeah, that's another valuable, what you're saying about sort of our self-judgment is another valuable thing to apply don't know to. And in fact, we could connect this with cognitive behavioral therapy, if you're familiar with that, in which, you know, the basic principle of it, as I understand it and as I've worked with it, is you look at what your thoughts are, and then you question how true they are, you know, and you sort of even maybe put in alternative interpretations of the things that you were thinking about, like I'm really an idiot, you know, I'm a failure, like, oh, okay, now is there any counter evidence to that idea? So that starts with the idea of don't know, because you know, our problem is that we know that we're idiots, right? If we know that, then there's no way to break out of it, you know. But if you can go, well, maybe that's not, I don't know if I'm an idiot, maybe I'm not, are there any, you know, so that then maybe that's what in my mind ties it to forgiveness, you know, that it's like, oh, I that my self criticism is tied into a belief that I know that I'm a certain way. And then when I recognize that I don't really know that's true, that's a kindness or an act of forgiveness to myself. I think that's how it kind of
Thank you.
works in my mind. So yes, Byron Katie, right, asks, is it true? Yeah, that's right. Uh, right. And
Well,
Byron Katie.
Kevin,
Yes.
it's Susan.
Hi, Susan.
I just wanted to throw into the discussion that, when I was first getting sober and learning the steps and how it works, I came to it from a non-religious background. And So when I got to the part about God as we understood God, I formed the impression and had it for a long time that I needed to understand God.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was a problem until I found the Buddhist path, where I feel like seeking is the point and not finding. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it wouldn't be bad to add that to the step as we understood or didn't understand God. You know, why not? Why do we have to understand God? Like, in a way, I think I say something about that earlier. Like, how are we supposed to understand? You know, especially if you have any traditional whatever idea of like, if God created us, how are we supposed to understand the thing that created us? But anyway, it's not quite how I believe. So not even nearly how I believe. But anyway, yeah, that's true. You know, and
Kevin,
yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
interrupt.
no,
Okay. Leslie, I appreciated when you talked about the state of mind being impermanent,
yeah,
because like just recently, I said to myself, I need to start writing a mood journal and just keep, my moods change, and all of a sudden, and like today's a really good day. How'd that happen? And a couple of days ago, I was miserable. And maybe I can look and see, triggers and things, um, but my state of mind changes, and that's supposed to be okay, because I think human beings have changing state of minds. Um, Comment?
yeah. Well, you're reminding me of the lyrics of a song I wrote a long time ago called Moon Dreams. My mood is like the ocean's ebb and flow. You know, it's just, yeah. I mean, and again, really good point. I mean, that's one of the main ways that I hold on to sanity is when I'm crazy, I remind myself that it's temporary. You know,
Yeah, I
uh,
think we call it "this too shall pass," and it's
yeah,
hard to remember that.
it
When you're
is
in a particular state of mind, it's hard to remember that it's gonna pass.
right.
Just don't know where or when.
Right. The mind state itself is is telling you that it's going to last, that it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
The feeling of the mind state is that it's solid and permanent. And that's an illusion. So it's one of the reasons why Buddhism emphasizes impermanence and really encourages us to reflect on it over and over and over. So it's like taking refuge in Dharma is like, how do I do that? Well, you know, every day. And so in your meditation practice, this is the 5 daily contemplations. I've talked about this a while back. Um, the the first 4 of the 5 daily contemplations that the Buddha recommended are recollecting that you are of the nature to age, to sicken, to die, and for everything that you love to change. Everything, but he doesn't mention that everything that you don't love will also change. So, you know, um, and so I recite those every morning. There's a particular way uh, I, to a particular way it's written uh, and translated that, and I'll do it right now just so you hear it. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond death. All that is mine, dear and delightful, will change and vanish. And then that's the first 4. And the 5th one is about karma. It says, I am born of my karma. I am the heir to my karma. I am related to my karma. I'm supported by my karma. I'm the owner of my karma. Whatever I do, whether good or evil, this I will inherit. So that's what I recite that each morning. It's one of my few really ritualistic things in my practice, but I recite that each morning, and it really, it starts to, as you know, anything you frequently think and ponder upon kind of becomes a habit of mind. It starts to really become a default reaction to things. When you hear someone got sick or someone died or something broke, you know, you start to just go, oh, impermanence, oh, impermanence. You know, it's training. We have to train ourselves, because just as you're saying, there's this, it seems to be instinctive, a human habit to view things as solid. And I think that there's reasons for that, probably in evolutionary sense. It helps us to operate in the world. If we don't see like, whoa, everything is just like space, and you know, whoa, you know, it'd be hard to, you know, show up for things. But to keep that in mind really, really helps. And then yes, on the external, then it is harder on the internal, but you just have to just turn towards the internal. Oh, I'm of the nature to have feelings that will change. You know, that's just like that. These feelings will constantly change, and again, you keep observing that, and after a while, it sinks in. But it really does. At least for me, it took a long time before it started to sink in where I could catch it, and it doesn't always relieve the suffering in the moment, but it takes the edge off the suffering, and it takes the cloud that is the belief system that's overriding the suffering. That's what it really clears away. It's like, okay, I'm really sad right now, I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, or I'm angry, whatever, but I don't have this story that's saying it's always like this, I'm always going to be like this, what's wrong with me, I'm so screwed up, you know, or whatever the story is, right? And because that story, the second arrow the Buddha talks about, is the thing that really defines suffering as opposed to pain. And we can be with pain, and mindfulness teaches us to be with pain. Suffering, dukkha, is the real burden that we kind of create for ourselves, and that we can uncreate for ourselves. So yeah, I know. I just, it's someone asked if I would put that about karma in the chat. Can I do it? I guess I can do it. I was going to do some metta to end, but we'll do this to end. So I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. We're going to save this chat, and it'll be on my website. So, and this is the Ayakema's translation. So this fourth one is, I've heard various different ways of doing it, and I don't think this is the greatest, but it's just like kind of my habit of saying it this way. All that is mine, not mind, that too. All that is mine, dear and delightful, will change and vanish. So that's kind of harsh, but anyway, okay. I am born of my karma, heir to my karma. And the stuff about karma is really, that can be a book. I can't explain every piece of this exactly. Let's see, related to my karma. You know, you can reflect on what this stuff means. It takes supported by my karma, which is good news. It's one of the few things that's like, oh, good, I'm supported by my karma. And the owner of my karma, oops, too bad. Whatever I do, whether good or evil, this I shall inherit. Now, you can debate, okay, that's it. So you can debate whether this is all true. Some of it's obviously true, of the nature to age. The stuff around karma is where Westerners particularly struggle. Like what it all means, you know, I'm born of my karma, you know, that has a pretty, that's a pretty strong statement. And if you don't believe in reincarnation, then some of this becomes difficult, but I'm not going to be the one to sort that out for you. So we've run over every, thank you all for coming. Thank you again for your support through Venmo or PayPal, or some people even have sent me checks, which was nice. Anyway, whatever you can or cannot give is fine. I'll be back on Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific time. I'm also accessible through email. Most of this, we'll put this audio and video up on a link on my website. Most of my talks are on YouTube now, most of these, or at least the recent ones. And then the audio is on my website, you can download. So everyone be safe, keep wearing your masks, social distance, love one another, blessings. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks all
Thank
for
you
coming.
very much, Kevin. Thank you.
Very
Namaste.
helpful.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.